Welcome to Uncomfortable, conversations about culture and Christianity. My name is Eric, and I'm joined by Alex.
Hey,
what's up, Alex? And also, our guests are still here. We have Myron and Jamison. Thanks for being here, guys.
Hey, yes, thank you.
We are continuing this conversation about racism and reconciliation, and we are going to move into that other part of this conversation, which is reconciliation. But before we get too heavy into it, I got 3 questions for each of you.
Okay.
Who wants the advantage of listening to those questions before they answer?
You want to go first?
You can go first.
I'll go first.
Okay. All right.
I'll pass the next question.
Myron gets the advantage. All right. Have you ever had a nickname? If so, what is it?
Nope, never had a nickname.
Really?
Oh, that's
He's
not
lying.
even true.
He's lying.
I called him.
They call me.
So Jamison was my youth pastor for my senior year growing
Wow,
up.
brother.
I always called him.
I
always called him J Love. Because Omaha.
That was not my nickname.
Oh, wow.
J-Love.
Sound like
I
J-Lo.
never responded to J Love. J Love, stop calling me J Love.
J Love. We got.
This is a problem when people know
on
you.
the show today.
I love that Alex is here just to rat you out after he says,
No, I ain't got a nickname.
Did you say J Love or J Lo?
J Love.
I never answered to that. That's not.
He was always trying to get featured on some J Lo. So that's why he found his wife.
That's
J
funny.
Love.
Okay. All right. Next one. If you had a warning label, what would yours say?
A warning label.
Like warning. Jamison.
Lies about not having a nickname.
Warning label. Smooth, but can be lethal.
Wow, sound like Bruce Lee.
Smooth can be lethal.
Dang.
Okay. People better watch out.
Be on your coffin.
Tombstone, you mean?
Tombstone.
I don't think they
Smooth,
chisel
but
coffins.
It can be lethal.
Okay. All right. This one's easy. What was the last book you read?
Just within itself, Insider, Outsider might be the last, just off the top of my head.
Myron's sitting right here, and you're going to say that's the last book you read.
Insider, Outsider. White Fragility, I'm still going through. I'm reading White Fragility is one that I'm still wrestling through. And yeah, Insider,
Okay.
Outsider. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. All right. Same for you. Have you ever had a nickname, Myron?
Yes.
Are you willing to share it?
No. Fatso.
Fatso?
Yeah.
Hey.
My auntie used to call me Fatso, man.
Dang.
Is that jacked?
That'll do some damage to a kid.
Seriously,
Oh,
man.
wait. I gotta go back. Doctrine That Dances. Sorry, that's other book. My bad.
Doctrine of Dances?
Doctrine That Dances.
Doctrine That Dances.
Doctrine That Dances.
Your new nickname
is
is the Interrupter.
Sorry, I interrupted the whole thing. But I was like, I know that's not the last book I read. Doctrine That
What
Dances.
is that?
It's about it's by Robert Smith Jr. talking about preaching style, how you preach in the context of a multicultural congregation. And so it's talking about you can have theology form, but how you preach it has to be able to be related to black people. So
Is that who wrote that?
Dr. Robert Smith Jr.
The white guy?
Black guy.
Oh, okay. I'm just
I got you. Holla at your boy. Listen, I got it.
I like that.
Sorry.
Fatso.
Okay. Well,
right,
Fatso.
we will
next
not.
question?
We will not be referring to you as that. I mean, also, you got all ripped and buff lately.
Yes.
I mean,
Stud.
that's
Keto power, baby.
hashtag keto.
Hashtag can't eat no bread, sugar.
Well, the pizza's coming later.
Praise God.
All right, number 2. If you had a warning label.
Don't take me too seriously.
Okay. All right.
That's good.
That is good.
Yeah.
He's funny for real.
That's a good warning.
I feel free now.
Yeah, please.
I always do
He's
take
funny.
you seriously. So
Do you?
Yeah.
I laugh a lot. How's that?
Because you're from prison.
See, that's what white people think. Take him seriously. He might cut me or something. I might end up sending him back.
the first time I met J Love was when he came to the church
J-Lo.
that I was raised in. I remember the first time meeting you. You won't remember meeting me because it was at Grace. So
wow.
you came
Grace
out
University.
Yeah,
Oh,
Grace
can we
University.
plug- can we plug
out
them?
the penitentiary?
Yeah, so go
That's why.
to Grace University, kids. It's dead. Okay, but I remember, meeting you. I played basketball there, and you just came into the gym. We're shooting around, and you're like, "Who's this guy?" And then you're like, and you heard the snickers, he just got out of jail. And so from then I've been taking you serious. I didn't know what you were in jail for. So. We're just keeping it real, right?
I respect you, man.
I was in a 3-piece
Don't
suit.
take me
You
too
was out
seriously.
the straight.
Yeah, I was in a 3-piece suit though too.
Yeah, we was rocking
Probably
3-piece suits.
a red,
funny,
baby blue
man.
3-piece
I was powder
suit.
blue, baby.
Yeah.
That is funny.
Last question.
Good to air your prejudices. No.
Thanks for being vulnerable.
That's cool.
All right. Last book you read, or should I say last book you wrote? Which one?
Last book I wrote, How to Be White in a Black Man's World.
And that's the last book I read. So. Just so you know.
But I read Daring Greatly by Brené Brown.
Oh, that's good too.
Yeah, it's real good.
Awesome. Well, thanks for answering those. They're very important questions.
Yeah.
We had to get them answered.
Those are deep questions to let us know about you guys. So yeah, here we are back again. We just had a conversation. If you are just jumping on this because you're the person that's like, I don't want to deal with the problem, I just want the solution. You know, there's people out there that'll skip episode 1. Go back, listen to the first episode.
Yeah.
I think it'll really inform what we're talking about in this second episode. And just to randomly throw out shotgun a few stats before we get into this, Barna just put out this book talking about where do we go from here. That's all about racism and Christianity and things like that, hot off the press. And a few of the stats that just stood out to me that I think speak into this is half of Christians believe that the history of slavery continues to impact Black Americans today. But out of that, 8 out of 10 Black Christians believe it affects it, and only 4 out of 10 white Christians believes. And so I think that brings a disparaging number between those two things. And then to get into what we're talking about, reconciliation, forgiveness, things like that, the majority of Black and white Christians, so 62% of Black Christians and 71% of white Christians say forgiveness means repairing relationships. But when clarifying this, Black Christians are way more likely to clarify that this does not just mean just forgiving the offense, just forgetting the offense, I mean. Right. And so though we can forgive and we can move on, we can reconcile, doesn't mean things didn't happen.
Right.
And so overall, I think white people, from what these statistics say, is that their expectation is
get over it.
Get over it. You know, there's a lot of history. Just get over it. And so we talked about some of that history in the last episode. And so on this one, we really want to talk about what is the way forward. And you started getting into this a little bit, Myron, that it's really hard to even start to talk about a way forward without that center, what we're centered in, you know, and having that same starting point that we're centered in being the gospel. And so for us to have this conversation, there might be people listening that are like, forget all that mess, you know, like I don't believe any of that because they're not coming from the same starting point of us as the gospel. But for all of us as pastor and as men, we rooted our lives in the gospel. And so we can't help but speak from that point of view. And so let's talk about that a little bit. Last one, we talked about the problem. Let's talk about how do we start to move forward? We know there's a problem. How do we start to move forward as pastors inside of the church? How do we start to move forward as men, as fathers, raising our families, shepherding our wives, and all those kind of things?
Yep. I think from my vantage point, there's 2 things you have to look at. First, what's my biblical view? And then what's my leadership view? Biblically, what does it say we ought to be doing, and not skipping to fit what we want it to fit, but actually living out what the Bible says. In Ephesians 2:14, we know, for he himself is our peace, who has made us both one, and has broken down in his flesh and divided wall of hostility by abolishing the law of commandments expressed in ordinances, that he might create in himself one new man in place of 2, so making peace and might reconcile us both to God in one body through the cross, thereby killing the hostility. And that's the viewpoint. That's my biblical standpoint of Christ has killed that. He has brought us back together, and so he has torn down hostility. He has put that aside and says, I'm bringing all men under one body together. Now, you got to say, out of that, what does together look like? And if you're living this out correctly, you understand we have to do this thing together. It's not one side doing an action or the other. It is together. We have to be moving forward biblically and thinking. My church now has to be thinking biblically. Like it can't afford not to. It can't afford to stay stagnant. It can't afford to be, this is how we used to do it, so we're going to do it, because we know the church will die. In fact, by 2050, there will be no predominant race at all. There won't be, for the first time in history, whites will not be the predominant race. And so even to keep pace as a church, it's like we have to change. We have to say, this is what the kingdom is. This is what the kingdom says, what the Bible says, and we have to live that out. In order to do that, it takes courageous leadership. It takes a certain kind of leader, but it takes courageous leadership to say, I'm willing to pay the cost to see this kingdom a reality. Because oftentimes, because whether it's financially, they don't want to make the move, whether it's they don't want to lose people, they don't want to make the move, they won't make the move. But we've gotten to a critical point as a society and just church that we have to have courageous leaders who are saying, no matter what the cost is, I'm going to live out what the Bible says and how I ought to be doing and how my church should be reflected. And that takes courageous leadership to do that. And so having a biblical view, then also being courageous as a leader.
It's good. It's good. Other thoughts from you, Myron, on ways forward?
Yeah, ways forward. This is always fun, but I will say the only way forward is to first revisit the past. And I think we need a commitment to revisiting. And the cool thing about that is there are a number of resources that will help us revisit, whether I'm going down to the African American Museum.
Yep.
Whether I'm on YouTube, there's just an article that just came out about 1619. There's a Netflix documentary called 13th or something like that.
Yeah.
We have to revisit or we will repeat.
Wow.
I think every one of us, whether we are a parishioner or a pastor or a leader, we can all revisit.
Yeah.
It's important. We have to become historians again. And historians of not just the dominant culture, but the culture as Americans. Secondly, I'd say this, practically, read. Read an eclectic perspective. Read what white folk have to say. Read what black folks have to say. Read what Latino people have to say. Read what Asian folk has to say, because in that you hear God. If I'm not hearing from diverse backgrounds, I'm missing the full voice of the Lord. Right? So I'll say revisit, I'll say read. And then also you have to ask yourself, okay, what is my personal responsibility that's within my control? I can't control what's happening in the White House unless I have a call to politics.
Yeah.
Unless I have we have civil duties. Obviously, we have civil duties. I'm not saying that, but I have to look at what am I like? I can't control what's coming out of POTUS's mouth. I can control what's coming out of mine, though.
Yeah.
So what personal responsibility do I need to take? For example, where do you shop? Who do you shop? Black folks in my neighborhood, they rather go and shop at Amazon rather than shop at the business guy who I just left consulting him on social media marketing. He has a shoe store, but we rather go on Amazon and get the Jordans instead of go to his shoe shop. And that's something wrong with us indigenous North Omahans. There's a reason even behind that. Or we'd say, hey, are those Jordans real? If you buy them in the hood. But if you buy them from Nike, Finish Line or something like that, oh, you smell them? Oh, they good. Nah, man. And so we have to begin asking ourselves, what is my personal responsibility? Another thing, man, who are the heroes that I can start to model after? Because we change by the experiences and relationships that we have.
Yeah.
Right. Another cool thing is what role do I have in restoration? Okay, what role do I have in restoring? Because I believe that the gospel is both social and is both eternal. It's not like it's both in communication and demonstration. When Jesus got ready to preach the gospel, he said, "The Spirit of the Lord God's upon me because He has anointed me to preach, right, the gospel to the poor, to set at liberty those who are oppressed." Like, so he's telling us, this is my response to how and what I want to see as a result of heaven coming. When he's feeding the 5,000 plus, he's not just giving them good gospel. He's demonstrating good gospel. And so, in light of my personal responsibility and in light of what I can control and the influence I have, what is it that God wants to use me to restore? Is it the education system? Is it entertainment? Is it athletics? And it's not the big restorative steps we need to take. It's the small restorative steps we need to take. When you're reading a book to your kid, is that book reflective of the dominant culture? Or do you read something by someone else that can help shape our kids? Like, the reality is that how we're raising our kids will be how they'll raise their kids. And so I just think those practical. So in light of all that, as a person, what can I do? What steps can I take? And I'd say this: they don't need to be big steps, because we know we end up falling on our face when we try to change a whole thing. Like, what are the personal things we can do? So I think that's important. I think also in my early days of having conversation on reconciliation, I would say dumb stuff like leave your church. And I wouldn't say that today, but I would say, hey, if you're a part of a church, like, start to have some conversation with people you go to church with. One cool thing we did when there was a killing, and I think the guy in Minnesota, I think it was Philando or something like that. One cool thing Pastor Matthew and I did, which was pretty cool. He called me and he said, "Man, I'm hurting. I just found out what happened. This guy died," and he's like, "Man, what do we do?" And I said, "What if we worship together?" And within 24 hours, over 800 people from around our city was before Jesus, worshiping and weeping and crying.
Yeah.
And so it was this powerful moment. And then after that, we took communion together.
Yeah, that was powerful.
Were you there?
Yeah.
And then we broke up into groups of different people. And then the instruction was, hey, after this, meet again. And I can't tell you how many people. I was at City Light in Council Bluffs. And this lady walks up to me and she said, "You won't believe our group is still meeting." That was a win for the kingdom.
Yeah. Even so, I mean, from there, and you want that to spread. I mean, as a church, like, do you grieve and mourn if something happens in the city? You take time out in your service to pause and say, "Hey, this is what happened. It may not have been in our backyard, but it was in our city. Let's take time and let's pray." We did that this past couple of weeks. Happened to be in our backyard, but normally they wouldn't have taken time to even say anything to that. And we took time in our service. Hey, we're stopping and pausing and praying for the families, for the victim, for all that happened. I mean, that's huge as a body, saying we want to respond to what's happening in our city. And do we even take time out in that space as well?
That's good. I think of some of those gospel implications, and I was reading through, one of my favorite passages is Philippians 2, and we talked a little bit about white privilege and just the idea of privilege in the previous podcast. And I remember I was reading it, and I love this passage, and I was doing that this summer. And I just remember as I was reading it, just this voice, the Holy Spirit, kind of challenged me to read that, Jesus didn't consider equality with God something to be grasped, but he poured himself out and replaced that equality with God with the word privilege. Jesus didn't consider his privilege, because that's what it ultimately was, as something to be grasped. But what he did was emptied himself out. You know, he had a posh place in eternity that he could have just hung out in, and he didn't create the problem. We created the problem, and yet he didn't say, no, you created the problem, I'm not going to fix the problem. But what Jesus says is what Philippians says, Paul says over and over in his reconciliation languages, he came and made himself nothing. He took on the form of a servant, and he went and sacrificed ultimately his life, and sacrificed himself on the cross. And that's the model that we have as Christians, is somebody who didn't create the problem, yet acknowledging there needs to be a fix to the problem. And so none of us in this room created the problem. You know, there's maybe micro problems that have been created by things we've done, but ultimately none of us created this problem. But our call in following Christ is to be people that don't say, I didn't create the problem, I'm not going to fix it. It's through the power of Christ, through the Holy Spirit. I didn't create the problem, but I'm going to be there to help fix a problem I didn't create. And that's what the gospel is. That's how we became reconciled to Christ.
I'm so glad you're bringing this up. And I never thought about, I've been in that same passage, and I did that very same thing. And it blew me away that God, in all of his privilege, emptied himself in the person of Jesus. And in addition to what you just said, I just thought about Pharaoh, right? So here's the thing. This whole race thing is hard. Blood has been shed. Lives have been lost. I mean, I'm not taking away from that. If you look at the whole narrative of human history, it's been bloodshed, right? It's been bloodshed between Cain and Abel, two brothers. It's been bloodshed with the Egyptian Israelite situation, and one of the things that I see that's there in the text is that Pharaoh invited Joseph into his palace. And he humbled himself. Even though he had all power, he humbled himself. And he actually admitted that he needed a Joseph. And then after he does that, he then puts him in position and allows him to lead in a place where he probably shouldn't have, because he wasn't even Egyptian. And from a leadership perspective, one of the things I will always acknowledge was a Ron Dochler, who used all of his privilege to give me a platform. That straight out the penitentiary, regardless of my rap sheet and regardless of my color, sat across from me in a Grace University foyer and looked me in my eye and said, I've been praying for somebody like you. And I think when I have a friend right now, same thing. He said, Myron, I didn't create this problem. I know there's a problem. I want to use my gifts to serve black folks. This guy's a graphic designer. So now all the dudes, all the people who I'm connected with who want to start businesses or write books, this guy for free uses his time and his talent to help brand companies that are in the inner city.
Yeah.
And so if you're watching right now, you say, man, what can I do? My question is, who can you empower?
Yeah.
That's you know
huge.
what I mean?
Yeah. It happened to me. Not trying to make it them the hero, but Ron Doser did the same thing for me, but I had a Tyler Zach who I co-lead with, I say like Benson and all the elders and the whole church, 98% white, came together and said, this is not what we want to be and do what we need to do. And they could have said, we want to be the same. We'll go get another white pastor and we'll be good. And they said, that's not what we want. We want to be kingdom. We don't want to just be good. We want to be kingdom. And they reached out and we had conversation, and they didn't just say, hey, come be the outreach dude, come be, a teaching pastor. No, we give you control. Here it is. You make decisions, you empower, you do that. and we'll do this thing together. And so they took what they had and said, we'll relinquish over. And even the thought of this, oftentimes will have, it's easy to put people in position and say, hey, here you go do that over there, but not give control.
Yeah.
And say, hey, you go be the outreach dude. We want to be the outreach dude, but you not really have insight or say so. But it's something to say, hey, we're willing, not only willing to control, but we're willing to follow your leadership. Here's a question: can you follow a black man? As a white older man, can I follow a black man? Can I follow a black young man? You know, if you look at even multicultural, multi-ethnic churches, still even if they're multicultural, the percentage is still high that the head pastor is white. Because yet there's still idea of can I trust and follow a black man? And so you got to look at that, but saying we're willing to relinquish control and empower, and you make the decision where we're not lording over you.
That's good, man.
Yeah, that's really good.
I'd love to know what you guys think too, like what y'all.
Yeah, we've been doing all the talking. We're the stereotypical black guys who do all the talking.
But y'all think this?
We're just soaking it all in, just taking it all in.
Yeah, and part of that was that thought, that I had this summer reading Philippians 2 and that privilege piece and how that's challenged me. I think just in practical ways, it's even hard for me to fully grasp what it even it looks like to live in a mono-ethnic home. So like my parents, like their story is they had 4 of us biologically, and man, my house is crazy growing up because they felt a call to be foster parents, and God nudged them to do that. And we had every race and color and issue that came along with that. Foreign exchange students from other countries, got, siblings that have had, been transgender, all like every area that you can talk about diversity has existed inside of my family. And so sometimes I even don't quite understand what it's like to grow up in an all white household. And so as I lead people, I even lead with an understanding or a lack of understanding what that would even be like. Like right now, currently my home that I'm the father and husband of is an all white home. And so in my growing up, there's some tension with that of, okay, what are we going to do? Like, how are we going to be purposeful and not just creating this bubble for our kids, to live in? And we live in West Omaha, and, predominantly, my kids' school is mostly white. And so me and my wife have to think and are thinking, and yes, they have aunts and uncles that are wild and have, that are just different, not wild, but different than them. And some are wild. Okay, I'll actually put that out there. Some are wild. And so we're thinking, how do we become intentional about these types of things and bringing more diversity into their lives and putting them in diverse situations? And so that's something growing up in that kind of culture that I'm finding myself just by osmosis, I guess, being in this all white bubble that I didn't purposefully just choose to go there, but what I have to do is purposefully choose to get out of it. Yeah. And that doesn't mean I have to move across town, but it means the conversations that I'm having with my kids, the friends that I have and we invite over to our house. It means the people that my kids see me having relationships with, the people inside of my Bible study and my journey group, and trying to be intentional about what are they seeing modeled from me. Yeah. Because whether I like it or not, and whether it's their fault or my fault or not, they're seeing something modeled. So I have to go an extra mile and give up maybe some of my freedom or what's comfortable for me to walk into some of those uncomfortable situations. And it's not going to just happen. I have to work hard to be intentional about it. And that's one of the costs of following Jesus, is you have to give up the things that you want and the things that are comfortable to pursue things that are uncomfortable. Even you talked about feeding a
little bit of that. I think that's in there.
Feeding the 5,000, right? Yeah. Like after Jesus did that, they're like, man, we didn't have to cook that meal, and cooking a meal in that culture was an all-day thing. And then the next day, Jesus is like, whoa, there's too many of you guys. You guys don't know what it's right. You don't know what it's going to cost you.
The real cost. Yep.
And then all of a sudden he has that conversation, and they're like, oh, there's a cost to this.
Later.
Peace out.
Right.
And man, this whole it didn't make sense. He got this big crowd. He had all the momentum, and then he's like, "Oh wait, there's a cost involved." And then a lot of people didn't want to pay that cost, and so I'm determined in my life to figure out where I'm going to lay my chips, where I'm going to pay that for the sake of not just me, but the sake of my kids and their education, like their life education, not just their book smarts, but their cultural education, cultural IQ, and things like that. And so
I think sometimes too, it's about that heart check. You know, like when there are moments in your day-to-day life that you're going through, and we brush it off, or we say, "Oh, that's just the way it is." You mentioned your kids, and I think about my kids too, and how, like you said, what they see you do, the people that you're involved with. And I had like one of those like serious heart check moments at Arenza, you know, where all Nebraskans have good heart check moments.
heart or gut check.
Yeah, both. Gut check came later. But it was one of those things where, I'm there with my family, and like my kids wanted to get the free ice cream. There's a little coupon on the bag, and my daughter, she's very much. She's 10, and she's probably not listening to this, so I can talk about her. But she's very shy. Like, she doesn't want to like interact with people if she doesn't have. Like, she likes to do with her friends and stuff like that. But strangers, she's always just going to be a little bit off put by. Like, she's nervous. And there was an African American couple up at the register ordering their food, and she didn't want to go up there and ask for her ice cream. And it hit me right then. I was just like, wait a second. Like, is this because there's never been anything like in our household, like there's nothing like that would have caused her to be like fearful of another race or anything like that. So I'm like, why? Like, what is this? Is this something, And so, I'm not trying to say, oh, wow, Eric, you win the parenting award. But it was one of those times where I realized it was just, a moment where you kind of have that heart check and you go, okay, I need to talk to her about this. Like, what was that? Like, and I said, well, why were you, what was the problem? Why didn't you want to go with it? It came out that it was a stranger. Like, it wasn't necessarily a race thing, but I do think that you have to be like aware of that. You have to have those feelers on. Like, if you're constantly just going to write things off, even about your own emotions. We've talked about it earlier, and I think you mentioned it, Jamison, about how you were constantly thinking about your race, and it's almost a stressor, and I think a lot of white people have never had to never experienced that, like I could talk about like being a fat person or something like that. Like I'm way overweight than I am right now, and I know I've been judged by that. Like, oh, okay, well, let's bring out the extra food on the buffet. But it's one of those things like that's not something. I can't equate that to just constantly being judged, but because of the color of my skin, and that's the thing that I think if we can impart some empathy to people to understand, like, this is what it is. Like, you're not thinking beyond yourself and your perspective.
I think as I was listening to that story, it's not just about what your kids haven't experienced, if they haven't experienced racism or bigotry inside of your house, but it's also what they haven't experienced.
Yep.
And so it's going to be foreign to them, for some people, like they're just their first time they experience someone of any culture, whether they're black, white, just from another country. If you've just never experienced that, if we haven't given them that experience, that's going to be our natural reaction. And so sometimes in our shielding to keep our kids safe, which I think we all want to keep our kids safe. We love our kids and we want to keep them safe. Sometimes our shielding and stuff like that actually is what causes that reaction.
Yeah.
Because we also haven't been intentional about putting them in situations where they would have that experience. And so the first time they see it, they panic, and they should panic because they've never experienced it. And so it's new and foreign to them. And that's what we do as humans. When something's new and foreign, there's this sense that God, I think, has given us to like be on alert. And that's something I think God gave us. So we have to, in order to not have those experiences, to be even more intentional about giving those, I think, in some ways. So.
Yep.
The gift of experience. We celebrated I was at a parade back in July, I believe. It's called the Juneteenth Parade. And a couple of days later, there's 4th of July. So I'm on Facebook and I'm down at this parade and I'm talking about Juneteenth and this is amazing and folks are like, "What is Juneteenth?"
Yeah.
You know, and I'm just thinking, wow, we know what July 4th is, but we don't know about Juneteenth. We don't know about how black people got liberated and or at least the Emancipation Proclamation and how, you know, now black folks can now, you know, we don't talk about that type of freedom in our country. And it just dawned on me as you were talking that we have to give our kids the gift of experience.
Yeah.
They have to experience culture. They have to experience diversity. And it has to be intentional.
Yep.
We have to plan it. I heard somebody say one time that what we do on purpose or what we do intentionally are the things that we actually care about.
Yeah.
And I think we would have to follow suit. In my neighborhood right now, my boys, they're friends. They're mixed, Latino, white, black, and I joke and laugh, and yet I'm appreciative that they get to experience what it's like to play with kids who look different than them, even believe different than them.
Yep.
And our kids need the gift of experience.
Yep.
Yeah, that's good.
Just practical step. So I got little girls, right? So I got 3 little girls, 4, 2, and 6 months. Would you say giving the gift of experiences, instead of buying the white Barbie, we get a different Barbie, or is that like to help them understand not just your stereotypical, let's just get the white one, the one that looks like you? Are those small steps, I'm just curious, that you can take?
They won't play with the
6
black
months.
Barbie.
I don't know exactly. I don't know on that one.
I'm curious.
But I think here's the thing. Just so you gotta examine your life. So if I live in West Omaha, so then what if I put my kids on a sports team that's in North Omaha? Or what if I go coach, you know, a North Omaha team? You know, like that's an experience. Or if we live in West Omaha, maybe I take my kids to school in a different area. That gives them experience. And so I think there's always little steps that you can do. We lived in North Omaha for 5 years. And our daughter went to a different school, but our church, it was a beautiful expression. When we moved to Northwest, because we were going to plant a church in Northwest Omaha, we're intentional about putting her into a school that was in North Omaha. She's at an elementary school in North Omaha because we didn't want her not to have that experience. Like my life I live is not, I don't just talk about it. It's like, no, I'm saying I think it's hard for me sometimes to talk about it because I don't live my life like, am I being diverse? It's just my life.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like I don't walk around like, all right, you know, I'm just like, it is. It reflects. My friends are diverse. My family's crazy diverse. I'm married to.
But I don't want people to miss what you just said though. You said, I don't think about being diverse. Like it's not something I think about. The principle in that is that's because that's who you are.
That's who I am. Yeah.
And so, and then fundamentally, it's what I believe.
Yep.
Right. And so, and the only way to change our belief system is to have equally powerful experiences that challenge what we believe.
Yep.
Right. We have to. So if all I'm around is white people, I have to challenge that belief with something that's equally powerful or more powerful.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So if I'm going to, okay, how many people do I have over my house in a month that my kids see? Wow, man, I want our kids to experience culture. Right. So maybe the first step, I'm not going to invite a black person over, to my house, but I am going to go to North 30th Street and go grab some fried chicken.
Right.
And bring it back to the crib.
Right.
And allow my kids to taste that
Hey, let me tell you,
1,500 calories.
That's an experience. Hey, that's a beautiful experience. One, and
delicious.
I'm telling. Hey, but it's amazing what that does. I took our team over to African American museum, and because I knew we could talk about it, but I knew someone had never crossed over. They said, I never knew this was here. Not the museum. North Omaha. Oh no! They was like, "What is this?" Wow. I'm not lying, but
you're making that one up.
And then I said, "Well, you should go try this restaurant over here." I said, "I think it's Emery's Cafe, which is absolutely amazing. Shout out, amazing peach cobbler." I said, "It's a great restaurant," and I didn't know that was it. And then they said, I heard they got grits. I said, you got to go to what's the chicken place on
Time Out
Chicken. I said, you got to go to Time Out. And you would have thought, the mind was blown by the amazing chicken that was there. And so now, because of one experience, they said, oh, it's not what I thought it was. Mm-hmm. It's not what it was being portrayed. It's actually beautiful. Yeah. And now they're starting to experience even more. So it's just a little things like that.
Yeah.
That
so
trigger
things. And so like what you just said is powerful because okay, what is it? Every one of our cultures are powerful, unique, and beautiful. Yeah. And so every single week you can put together a cultural experience plan where it's like, okay, once a week we're going to experience a different culture. Mm-hmm. Whether it's going out to eat, whether it's going, maybe this Christmas, maybe instead of getting a shirt from Walmart for our kid, wherever you shop, maybe we go online and buy our kids something from Africa. Mm. Or maybe, so that they're actually tasting culture mm-hmm. and getting, hey, this is actually beautiful. This is amazing. You know what I mean? But asking ourselves the question, how can I experience culture this week?
Yeah, and it's not just we always talk about black and white, but there's so many other beautiful. You go down to South Omaha, take your kids down, see the beautiful. How they talk about community. They do community in a powerful way. And so even going down, taking them to restaurants and hanging out there. It's so much. I think we isolate and sometimes it's out of our own fears that we don't allow those experiences to happen and as leaders, we have to break that mold.
Right.
Yeah.
That's good.
I think I'd love to talk about, because I'm a big believer in what you celebrate, you replicate. And so I'd love to talk about where you guys have seen this done well, maybe, or seen in Omaha some examples. We've talked a little bit offline about some examples where you've seen and been invited to the table. You guys both talked about Ron Doetzler and a guy that's really moving the needle forward, I think, in Omaha. Mm-hmm. And I think there's other movements in Omaha that are part of that. What are some ways you could celebrate and blow wind into the sail of what's happening and help us continue to do that, celebrate what God's done, where he's brought us from as we look forward to where he's taken us to?
Celebrating. Wow. There's a lot of things that happen. I think Within Reach has been a great movement, bringing churches together, not only to worship, but to talk about things and bringing people to the table. I think Within Reach has been amazing. For me personally, Christ, not trying to brag, but Christ Community helped us out when we were planting a church. Last year, they gave us free space to be able to host our not only our interest meetings, but also our Sunday gatherings for free. Like, no questions asked. Like, here you go. So that was huge, and that's stuff that doesn't get talked about. And there's many things. I think Bridge Church does an amazing job at doing it. I think Myron right here has done an amazing job at having conversations. We've had a lot of diversity conversations. We've had things that have happened in a city like Benson that wouldn't normally happen. But I think those are a few things within the city that's happening. But I'm probably missing a lot. You may know some more things.
Yeah. I think when we look at our city And the response to things that have happened in our country, the way the church has responded has been amazing. And some of the things that we may never see, the calls and conversations that pastors are having behind closed doors, the coffee meetings that are happening. I can't tell you how many pastors I've formed relationships with. I had a pretty well-known pastor in our city, reach out and say, "Hey, I want friendship." And him and I are great friends. And so I would say that pastors, one of the cool things that this city may not know, and those who are watching or listening, is a decade ago, it was about 25 white pastors, 25 black pastors went down on what we call the justice journey. And Dr. Perkins was a part of that. Alvin Bibbs from Willow Creek was a part of that. And out of that came amazing friendships. One of my good friends right now, Leroy Garner, white dude, older, is one of my good friends because we took a trip to journey and sojourn together around the civil rights movement. And we had amazing conversation around that. And so that happened a long time ago, but the repercussion of that is still largely a part of my life personally. I think the other cool thing is me personally being a part of this narrative and the story God's writing in our city of diversity. And man, honestly, planting multi-ethnic churches, that's a win. And looking to and even a larger win is that diverse churches in our country, where we were at like 5 or 6%, we've moved the needle a couple percents. Like, that's a huge win in our country to see that. And so, yeah, I'm celebrating that. I'm celebrating the fact that there's a next generation of kids that are my kids' age right now, 8752, that are celebrating diversity. And my kids' school has 14 languages spoken. Wow. I think that's amazing. Yep. And so I'd say that. I'd say another conversation that needs to be had is not just ethnically, but gender.
Yeah.
And so there are strides in that conversation that I think is happening as well. So much more to be celebrated, but I would definitely say, man, I'm thankful for the progress we've made thus far.
I mean, there's many conversations that I think more than ever that's starting to happen within the body and outside of that. But you're starting to see more pastors getting together instead of competing, cheering each other on. Which is huge. And so I haven't seen that in a while, and starting to really see that happen in our city.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
A few weeks ago was the GLS, and I remember one of the quotes that I wrote down was from a lady named Bozema St. John. And she's been, on a lot of teams, and she worked at Uber, she worked at Apple, and she's a black lady that's had a lot of influence, and I guess walked into a lot of jobs as like the lady whose job is to bring diversity. But she talked about diversity and inclusion and talked about two different things. And so she said this, which I thought was interesting, but I'm curious what you guys think about it. Diversity is being invited to the party. Inclusion is being invited to dance.
Well, can I respond to that one?
Yeah.
I think she missed out on the third leg.
What's the third leg?
Equity is being asked to plan the dance, because I think, or to plan the party, because
okay,
yeah, I think that's the missing conversation to the race card.
Wow,
because diversity, what'd she say? Diversity is
being invited to the party. Inclusion is being invited to dance.
Yeah, and that's cool if I can go and have a good time. But I never was asked to plan it. I never was invited to the table to say, this is the direction that I think the dance want to go, because the dance implies that somebody outside of my control planned an experience that they didn't ask me about.
What if you didn't like the music?
Yeah, so, and I know I'm being a little petty, but I thought about that, and I'm like, wait a minute. You know what? Thank you for inviting me to the dance. But next time, can we plan it together?
Yeah, that's good.
That's good.
He thought all that. I didn't know that quote. He heard the quote.
Maybe I was reading my notes. Dang.
I was like,
but I thought the quote was great.
I know you didn't pull that one out the air like that,
Yeah,
man.
Well, yeah, I've been thinking about
I
that.
thought that's good, man.
That is good. And
Sorry, I didn't mean to rain.
that's good.
Still
I
a
thought
good
it was a good
quote.
quote.
Yeah, it's still a good quote.
Yeah, it's a bad quote, Alex. Why'd you
No,
bring
it's not
that
a
to the
bad
table?
quote. Kill it. Don't let her hear this.
I won't say her Twitter handle because
Don't
people
say
in church
it.
would get mad.
Yeah. Do you have any? I think we have some questions from social media.
Yeah.
If we want to, before we wrap up, if you have anything that you could ask them, some quick fire questions.
I'm going to quick fire these, okay? So you can give me yes, no's,
maybe so's.
maybe
Jamison will
so's,
answer
or quick answers.
Okay.
And I'm just trying to answer ones that
Don't be
I can
don't be
ask.
scared. Just ask.
No, I'm not. Here's one. Is not talking about our racial differences the way to end racism?
No.
Did it? Done.
Yes. No. No. I mean no. Yes,
Okay.
you're right.
Okay.
God is not colorblind, people.
Oh my goodness! I saw a billboard.
I know that.
I think I saw that on your Instagram.
About God is colorblind. I almost ended my friendship with Facebook on that for letting them.
Oh my
Anyways.
goodness. Okay.
Okay. How can the church support black men and the challenges they navigate every day?
How can the church support black men?
Just give us one way the church can support black men.
Oh, empower.
Empower. Okay.
Ask us what we think.
Ask what you think. Okay. Another question. Discuss prosperity gospel versus true economic social empowerment.
Prosperity. I have a whole thing on prosperity gospel because
That's like your thing. That's what you do.
well,
You're a prosperity preacher.
Well, I believe God's called us to be prosperous, but prosperity, because it's gone on this whole other thing, it gets a bad name and rap. And if you read Psalms, it goes and it calls us to prosper. So you can't leave that out. And so I think that's got a whole negative thing. So depending on Swarm, we don't even talk about prosperity. We're gonna go Bible. It's like, well, in your Bible, God has called us to be.
And then the other thing is
prosperous.
this. The other thing is this. If you're prosperous, you don't talk about it.
Exactly.
So a lot of people have preached the gospel of prosperity because that's become the goal. I think it becomes gospel when it becomes the goal.
Yeah, that's never been.
You know, the goal is Jesus.
Yep.
Right? Poverty is an enemy of the state, of the kingdom. You know, and so I think we have to get back to what's the aim of the gospel, and then what are the implications of the gospel in my personal finance.
Exactly.
I'm just trying to get on preacher sneakers.
So
We talked about that in another episode.
boot
You
game,
can go back
Boot
and listen to
game.
that. Okay, a couple of quick ones, and one of these is for us, Eric. I think.
Oh, good.
As black people, what lies?
That one's not for us.
No, not this one. Not this one.
Oh, you black now.
I said, wait a minute.
One of these is for us. I got two questions. One is for us.
As black people, he says for us. As black people. All right.
One of them. I am not. If you're listening to this, I am not. Just to clarify,
He's black on the inside.
Yeah. As black people, to the black people in the room, what lies are you believing about yourselves or about white people? I don't even know the context of these questions. I'm just asking
I'm not believing
how
about
they're asked.
myself.
That's not the question. You're just reading somebody
I'm
else's
just reading
question.
someone else's question.
What lies do we believe about you?
About you and then about me.
Victim. I'm a victim.
That's what you believe about you?
Yes.
Okay.
I have in the past. There's no way to get out of this. We're just stuck.
Okay.
The lie, probably that I'm not less than, that I'm just as valuable.
And what about white people? What lies do you or have you? Because I think you guys are both mature and have wrestled through this, and so
that you don't care, and you really do. Like, you really do care.
Yeah.
I care.
I know you do.
Yeah.
I think that's oftentimes we say white people just don't care. Not like that's false, but sometimes it can come across or can seem like you don't care, but really do, like, for real, honestly care. Yeah.
I'm expendable, and I'm just a means.
This one's for us.
Okay.
Finally. As white people,
Yeah.
what myths or lies are we believing about racism and about black people?
Ooh, that's
Eric,
good.
so what are you?
can
what
put me on the
myths-
He's
spot.
sweating.
He went red quick.
I'll answer after you.
Okay, can you read it one more time so make sure I get
So,
the context?
As you, white guy,
Yeah, white guy.
what lies or myths are we believing about racism or about black people?
Man, that's yeah, okay. It's one of those things. Maybe that I'm woke. Maybe that's something like sometimes that you think that like I got to figure it out. I know the solutions, and then you just keep hearing more of the problem, and you go, "Wait a second, that's not right. That's not the answer. Like I don't have it figured out."
Yeah, that's good. And what about black people? What lies are you believing about black people?
Put me on the hot seat here.
Well, they just had to be on the hot seat. You got to be on the hot seat.
Geez. Okay. I'm thinking. They're so good. I feel outdone because it's just like boom, hot rapid answer.
I'll try to bail you out.
I'm
for a
gonna check
second.
back. Give me a
Yeah.
second to think.
Yeah. I think one of the lies that we believe about racism is that it doesn't exist and we're not all contributing to it. And so I think that it just doesn't exist, or that that was a problem way back when. But and I think how we define racism and prejudice, and I think there's layers of what that looks like, but that it just doesn't exist is predominantly like what I hear. Or we've come a long way, as if that's like we don't have anywhere else to go. And lies, myths believed about black people. Did you come up with your answer yet?
You don't wanna-
It's a safe space.
No,
It's okay, guys.
It's okay.
Yeah, I'm trying to think.
It's a safe
He's thinking
space.
about me getting out of prison.
What can
Come
I
on,
say?
man. Say
That's-
it, brother.
Yeah.
It's okay.
No, I think it's one of those things where when you put in preparing for all this, even it's one of those things where you're looking at all the differences, and I think, and I'm not trying to say, oh well, now I don't believe it, but I think a lie that I did. Going back to that colorblind thing is that sometimes you just want to, as a white person, you want to just go, oh, we're all just people, right? We're all the same. Everything's the same, and you want to believe that to where, and I think even going back to your Black Lives Matter from the last episode where you explained what that means, that there is difference, and sometimes it's a really, really big difference. And that's one of those things where I know I've lied to myself even about that, where you just go, oh, you could just write it off. Well, I mean, they're no different than me, so why should I care? Why should I help? Why should I get involved? What can I do? I'm not. And so I think that's one of the things that I've told myself in the past. Yeah.
I think maybe two things. One is that I could ever fully grasp what it would be like to be black. Like I just will never be able to fully understand that. And so I can empathize and I can do all that and go on this journey, but there's just a reality that people are going to treat me because of the color of my skin one way, and I can't ever fully put myself in those shoes. And I think the second one is maybe that that if I follow Christ and I give up my spot, or I give up my privilege, that my spot's going to be taken. That to follow Christ and be faithful in that means that I no longer have a seat at the table. That giving up my spot at the table, as if it's my spot anyway, as if the leadership is something I achieved without Christ anyway. And so it's rooted, they're both rooted, I think, in, well, the second one, especially in lies. The first one's not rooted in a lie. On this side of heaven, will never really understand what it's like to have different color skin, and don't try to do that ever for Halloween. That's stupid.
Please.
So
Never.
Just a public service announcement.
Yes.
Don't try it. So I think those are my
questions.
thoughts.
All right.
So shout out to the people that
Yeah.
shout out Instagram questions. I think I answered at least one from each of the people I got
Awesome.
questions asked. So
Thanks, guys, for being here.
For sure, man.
Thanks for having us.
We really hope that this is heard by people and that they really take it to heart, and just that we can convey some empathy and not just have this. I think sometimes people just get to the point where they just cut it off. They just say, this isn't for me. I'm not racist. I don't have a problem. And then they zone out and they take no responsibility for anything. And I hope that hearing these conversations and stuff can really, go a long ways to help people. Alex, you got anything else?
No, it's great. I appreciate it. Do you guys have ways that, like if someone wants to dialogue a little bit more about this, or someone wants to buy you a meal or buy you some whatever you can have on your keto diet or buy you coffee, or they just want to reach out on social media? I know you've got a book addressing this, other helpful resources that you guys would just shout out, or ways to contact you. We'll put like our podcast, or they can just email us. We can get them in contact with you. But I'm on social media, Facebook, Instagram, all the platforms, or myronpierce.com.
Okay.
Shout out Jamison I Am, Instagram. Shout out Woody Woo. I've never done a shout out ever in my life.
He's having some liberty going on right here.
I think Jamison at citylifebenson.org email me. I think we get some books. Right Color Wrong Culture is an incredible book to start out with.
Yeah, incredible.
Don't jump into a lot of stuff unless you read. That's a great one. Divided by Faith, another one. And if you want to go a lot deeper, Insider Outsider takes you into a whole other space that if you want to go even deeper.
Yeah, you'll know you found Jamison's Instagram because it'll always have 2 red exclamation points after every post. That's how you,
I think that's cool.
That's how you.
I don't even know what it means.
That's how you know you found
red.
it.
I need to help his ad copy a little bit
you
more.
do some of this stuff. Maybe you guys need to have a conversation.
I do, but he don't want to pay me.
It costs too much.
I got you. Yeah, we're so grateful. So seriously, from our church, we're grateful for the partnerships that we have and the investment that you guys have made and allowed us to make into you, and the conversations leading up to this, and hopefully conversations following this. We're really humbled and grateful you guys have stopped by and jumped on this, and hopefully we've moved the needle forward in some way, or at least had the conversation and invited people into having more of this. So
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
All right, cool. Thanks a lot.
Thanks.
If you would like to get into contact with us, you can reach out to us on social media at CCC Omaha, or you can email us at podcasts@cccomaha.org. We'd love to hear from you. And until next time, thank you for listening.